Hi everybody, it's Ian Ugato here, and I am taking you through another part of the next module around the state-based policies. And New South Wales is clearly what you can see there on your screen, and that's what I want to go through. So New South Wales has a state-based policy which helps with your ability to apply for what they call a new generation boarding house. Now, I don't like the word boarding house myself. I prefer communal residence or something else, micro apartments or something that would make it a better perception of what they really are. Because boarding house is taking people's minds back to 1950s, 60s, 70s, where they didn't quite have the type of resident that would stay in it that would be in the public perception a good thing. Though the current day new generation boarding houses have very good tenants in them, very good residents in them that are far beyond and far better than the perception of people's minds. So the reality is that it's much better than that. And the reason they had to call it a new generation boarding house policy was because the policy had to match up with legislation. Legislation's hard to change, policy easy to change. So that's what they had to do. I will take you firstly through the single room rental market and what council think about, firstly, Airbnb. Now, Airbnb or holiday rentals, there's a lot of houses listed across different municipalities and councils that will say that you can't do that. Now, there's 10,000 that we found across Airbnb in Sydney alone. There are only a few that will allow you to rent properties out, and that's Canterbury, Hornsby, Pittwater, Randwick, Manly, and Ryde. At this time, that will allow short-term rentals, though there is a acknowledgement and a consent form that needs to be signed and given to the council, which is not a over-the-top application. It's simply something to say, well, we are using it for holiday rental. There is currently a New South Wales inquiry. So you also have a few others that the coastal towns north and south of Sydney do also have a policy that allows short-term rentals. You've got Gosford, Pittwater, Shoalhaven, Kiama councils have holiday rental spots, and they will allow you to go into usage of those, and it's a very big contrast to actually the Sydney market. There is a New South Wales government inquiry currently in place for Airbnb, and I've read through every hearing of that. Now, what happens is that the politicians get together and create a band of friends that will then go off and interview different parties around the usage of holiday rentals in properties. And currently, you read through and you've got people from different bodies that will represent the inquiry, and they will go against it or all for it. And when I say that, what I mean is obviously Airbnb would go in there, and the CEO for the Australian component of Airbnb would be saying, look, this is a good thing, this is the new market, this is what's going on. And then, of course, you'd have the Hotels and Motels Industry Association going in there and saying this is not good for business. They don't pay taxes. They don't have any standards, and and the argument goes backwards and forwards. Eventually, and we're close to it, the New South Wales government will make a hand down to say this is what we believe should be happening via the inquiry, and then the state government either enforces it or doesn't enforce it. A classic example of that is Uber in recent times in New South Wales was the first state that allowed Uber to be used across the state, and that was after an inquiry. My belief is that after reading all the transcripts of all the people that have put it into the inquiry, I believe that they will make a approval for the usage of a holiday rental short stay policy across the state that may require self-certification. So that means building certifier sign-off. So that doesn't mean you sign off on it. It means that the building certifier signs off on it. And you would be able to use that property for up to 90 days without approval, I think, and more than 90 days would require approval. And of course, you've got strata that needs to come into this too. Company title needs to come into this too. There's a number of different things that you need to look at. So that's the holiday rental scene and what New South Wales looks like at the moment. It's not, we've got a whole section in your topics of your manual it's how to set up an Airbnb property, how to set up a stays property, and use it to your best advantage. So go to that topic manual and go through that. We've also got a module on that as well. the New South Wales single rental for the house of multiple occupation. So if you've not heard house of multiple occupation, you need to go back and listen to that component in module 1. And what the basic ruling is that it doesn't matter which council you go to, and most councils across the country, barring WA and Tasmania and South Australia, will not allow you, well, not even South Australia, so parts of Tasmania and WA will allow you to rent rooms out without any hassle because it's in their policy. All the rest of the country is essentially saying if you've got more than 2 unrelated parties in the property and they don't know each other and they don't share meals together, they don't share shopping and utilities together, then you have 2 households, and in which case you need approval for a multiple occupation dwelling, and that takes some time to get that. So if you live in the property though, it's a different set of rules. So if you live in the property, you can do in New South Wales 3 other people can live with you in different areas of the house, as long as they have access to the kitchen area and the communal area. So whatever living room, kitchen you would use, they would also use, and you can rent out by the room, whether you put them onto head tenancies or co-tenancies, or whether they're just a boarder or lodger is going to be your choice. So when you have choices around that, and we'll go through this in a second, you decide which way you want to go from a securities perspective and the flexibility perspective. So what a lot of people are doing in New South Wales is they are creating head leases. So they become the head, so they find someone in the property to become the head tenant, and then they put subtenants in underneath that. And that works okay. With any of this, it always comes down to one of the neighbours making a complaint because there's too much noise, or there's been an argument, or there's too many cars parked out the front, and that's when the council will come in. That's where you need to ensure that you followed the rules and that you have used the Rental Tenancy Act to make sure you sign them up correctly. Now, we've worked with an insurance company and we've come up with a policy working via myself, a fire safety specialist, and an insurance broker to talk to the underwriters and say, okay, we understand that the councils won't approve, in most of these cases, the ability for 4 rooms to be rented out. And we would like to create a policy. And the issue around this is, as always, that if there's 4 people staying in a property and they haven't known each other before they moved in there, and in the first week, say, before they get to know each other, there was a fire, you're now got 4 people that are simply just going out and doing and then there's a fire, they're simply going to go straight out through the front door, and they're not going to concern themselves too much about anyone else because their safety is their main concern. Whereas if that was a family of 4 people, they would be making sure that each one of them knows that there's a fire and they're getting out the front door. That's the problem that councils have. So if we can alleviate that problem by making sure that if you're going to use it with unrelated parties and you don't want to go through the major hassle of getting, and you may not be allowed to anyway, of getting multiple households and unrelated parties together, then the underwriter said, look, we agree that the councils are being a bit old style about this, and we will agree that if you do certain things on the property as a safety measure, we will insure you. So the first thing that they would like is smoke alarms. They would like smoke alarms in every habitable room. So that means, if you need to know what a habitable room is, those things that are not habitable rooms are the storage areas, bathrooms, laundries, storage areas. Everything else is a habitable room. So if you've got 4 bedrooms, you will put 1 smoke detector in every bedroom, and it will be hardwired with a lithium battery backup, and it will also be linked to all the other smoke detectors. Now you say, well, I've got a brick place and it's double story and it's too hard for me to run wires to link all the smoke detectors. That's okay. There is radio frequency ones that you can put in, and they're very simple and easy to set up. They'll also require evacuation lighting. Evacuation lighting will be lighting that will allow you to get to the front door whilst there is a fire on. So as soon as the smoke detectors go off, a little down light goes off and allows you to find a safe travel pathway to get out through the front door. They will require exit door lever handles. So when I say that, they mean that they want handles that you can simply, without needing a key, without having to turn a mechanism, that by pushing down on a lever, it will unlock the door to get you out through the main entrance. That's a simple door handle change. They're not overly expensive. They are, they're normal. But imagine being in a disabled bathroom and locking the door. If you've ever been in one, you push down on the handle and it unlocks the door automatically. They require an information or an evacuation sheet posted on the back of each door. This will be drawn up by a qualified person, and once it's drawn up, once it's drawn, it gets pasted onto the back of every door and also in the communal area to ensure people get out through the front door. And then they'll want fire extinguishers and blankets for that to happen. Now, the company that we have made the arrangement with is MGA. You can call Karen, and her phone number is there. Let her know that you're a high-risk student, that you want to get insurance, and she'll send you out a fact finder questionnaire about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and then she'll be able to quote on what the insurance is going to be. If you need the contact for the fire guys, just look up Running Man Brisbane, a guy called Dieter, Running Man in Brisbane, and he will be able to assist you around the country because he has contacts all over the country and he can help you out. Dual key properties. New South Wales is been renowned for being leaders when it comes to housing, and they were the first in the country to bring along the secondary housing policy at a state government level so that you could build a secondary dwelling and rent it to a second party without the need for, a multiple dwelling occupation application. And the multiple dwelling, as per usual, is in New South Wales, as long as you've got a block size of 450 square metres or bigger, that there isn't flood overlays and a few other issues and noise overlays and bushfire zones, then you can go to a private certifier. You can get approval through the private certifier for a building that is 60 square metres, and you can also add to that an outdoor area of 12 square metres, and also a garage and a shed to that as well. Then you could go through, get a 10-day approval and build that property and rent it to a second party. Now, my main point on this slide is that you do a dual key application, that your application has a dual key component to it, so that when you walk through the front door, you've got a choice of two doors to go through. One door gets you into a self-contained area, which might be called a media room, parents' retreat, or something that has its own bathroom and a little wet bar sink. And you go through a second door in that front foyer that gets you to another part of the place, which will have a bedroom and a kitchen and also a lounge area and bathroom, right? So that dual keying the house and dual keying the secondary dwelling gives you a huge amount of flexibility. Firstly, it could mean that you could put the HMO policy on each one of them if you've got the correct fire rating, like we've just, the correct fire principle stated in the previous slide, and that the insurance company is going to back you on that. If you wanted to do it as a standard rental for each one of them, two different leases, you're opening up what we call the funnel. You're opening up the amount of people that would rent your property. They will rent your property more often and probably for more money because of the flexibility of the floor plan. That will mean that you've got things like a parent that has teenagers and will want to stick the teenagers in one area. You'll have parents and grandparents that can have their own space in the house but can share the house. You'll have two siblings that have grown up, they're 25, 30 years old. They'll rent the property together and they'll live in two different areas with their boyfriend and girlfriend or husband and wife each. You'll have the ability for a carer to live in one side while an elderly person stays in the other side. You've got multiple families and multi-generational families that will stay in there. You've got a bunch of friends that will go in there and say, well, you take that part, I'll take this part. You're opening up your funnel. You're creating a very proactive, productive, adaptable floor space that will allow people to live in it. Now, one of the case studies, which will be done very soon, is from one of the Platinums called named Greg and his wife Karen. They went off and they put this plan into council. Now, the reason they put it into council was because the block size was under 370 square metres. So in New South Wales, when I say that you need a block size of 450 square metres for a secondary dwelling, then, and just for those of you who are not understanding, a secondary dwelling is the same as a granny flat. I just don't like the word granny flat, and it's a secondary dwelling policy. If you go and have a 450 square metre, I've said that you can go to a certify and get approval, and people automatically think that you can't get approval. You can get approval if you're under 450 square metres. It just means you have to go to council to get the approval and go through that policy. So here is a floor plan that went in. So notice that the floor plan is drawn specifically so dual key. You walk in through the front door. There's a door across here. You have the option of going into this area. So someone could rent as a HMO, someone could rent this area out. Then someone else would walk through this area. They've got 2 doors in there. They've got 2 bedrooms in there. They've got a bathroom, a kitchen space, and an area to work off. In this space here, you would allow for the possibility of a washing machine, or you'd hook up a washing machine somewhere in the garage and maybe move the garage door further down here. So the door's going there and you've got the ability to use the garage as the washing machine area. Now, you could also dual key the secondary dwelling. I would suggest that you do that in a way. That would mean, though, that you would need 2 bathrooms. And in this case, this is what they put into council. There was an objection against it. And so they went back to council and they redesigned it. They built a firewall exactly the same as they would when you would put a secondary dwelling in. Instead, they put a fire door into this location here. Once they went through and built this, and notice that the kitchen's now disappeared. It's now a wet bar. And this is bedroom 4 and 5. They went through, they got it approved through the council as this floor plan. The council accepted that. They then built the property, but they built it as if it was a secondary dwelling over here. As soon as it was built, they went to the private certifier and then they got approval to make this a secondary dwelling. How could they do that? Because they weren't changing the roof line of the building. It meant that they were allowed to do that and get through and change that from a 4th and 5th bedroom to a self-contained secondary dwelling, and they put in a cooking facility, and everything was done legal with 100% compliance. Now, this is how you use the rules and regulations as plasticine rules, so you mold them to suit your needs. And, they may eventually close up that plasticine rule and they'll stop you from doing that, and it will require a council application again. Though, for now, I think the councils are generally quite happy with doing this process if you're in the position that you have to do it that way. So they ended up doing quite a few of these. So they've got 3, 4, 5 of these that they've done those 2, and the cash flow on those is about $11,000. So they built one a couple of years ago, which is a standard rental, which rents at passive income of $4,000. And, Greg and Karen do really well out of these properties. But what I've done is worked with them to get them to the point where they've souped up their steroid base and they're now getting nearly $12,000. So they've tripled the income on this property after all costs by doing this strategy. And so why wouldn't you go and do this when you're going to end up for each one of them $12,000? So if we look at this scenario here, there's, just say there's 4 of them, that's $50,000 of income they've got coming in for an increased value of property. It cost them $592. I think it valued at $695 or something like that. So they may not get all their money back. At the same token, though, they're in a position where they can throw money in the deal and they're getting more cash flow. They were throwing money in the deals over here, but they weren't getting the cash flow. Here, they're still throwing money in, but they're getting better cash flow. And in that case, out of those 4 properties, you might sell off. If you're in a position where you can't throw money into it, sell off 2, 3 of the 4 of them and then pay down. And then you're in a position where you've got your money back and you can go off and do it again. Now, new generation boarding houses. This is something it really excites me because it's something that you could be doing potential on at small scale or big scale. When I say it's small scale, in New South Wales, the state government put a policy across the whole state that if you can tick off all the boxes, they'll allow you to put a council application in, which will override the council's rules and regulations. You still need to maintain the council rules and regulations, though when there's a crossover between the two policies, the state government policy overrules the local council. And you can start with a house which is 4 rooms, 4 bathrooms, 4 kitchens, and you don't require a communal area. So you can have 4 micro apartments in one house, and you can build that without too much hassle whatsoever. With the If you want to scale up and get bigger, you can get much bigger. You can get huge if you really want to, and get to a bigger style of accommodation. Now, there is no such thing as rooming accommodation in New South Wales. You go from HMO to boarding house straight away. So that means that you'll have a new generation boarding house that may be a 1B building, and also it could be a class 2 or class 3 building. So there's no smaller style. So when you go from, in other states, you go single room rental or HMOs to rooming houses, and then you build up to a boarding house. So the affordable housing state environmental planning policy, that's what that means here, is what they've put it in. So they put it under affordable housing, and again, affordable housing depends in the area you live in. If to rent a 3-bedroom house costs $900 a week, affordable in that area is probably $350, $400. If a house costs $500 to rent per week, then affordable in that area is probably $200 to $250. So it all has its ratio affordable. When it comes to the zonings that you can do and use the state government policy in, you've got all these zones here. You've got an R1 general residential, R3, R4, B1, B2, B4, and you can also do it in an R2 low density area, though you need to meet certain criteria to be able to do the R2. When I say that, I'll show you what I mean. You've got to do for an R2 and for the other zones, so R2 in particular, let's just think R2 for now. If you're within 800 metres of walking distance of a rail station or Sydney Ferries Wharf, or within 400 metres walking distance of a light railway station, you have the ability to be able to use the accessibility option. And I'll talk about those requirements in a second. If you're within 400 metres walking distance of a bus stop, used regularly between 6 and 9 p.m, so that means 1 bus per hour, and 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. weekends. So you need 400 metres, and then you need to have a bus per hour in between those times. Then you are in the accessibility region. If you're outside the Sydney region, then you have to be within 400 metres walking distance of a B2 local zone or a B4 mixed use zone or equivalent land use. That means that you need to get out your tape measure and work out whether you're within 400 metres to the block. And that can't be as the crow flies, it needs to be as you're walking down the streets. How do you do that? We'll check out where the zonings are and work that is. You can use something called Map My Run. So let's see if I can go into that and help you out on that. So if I go Map My Run as a Google search, it'll come up and you'll see the first hit is Map My Run. And you might decide that you want to work out from the front door of your property to the door of the local area zone. So say you've gone and you've checked the zoning maps, you know that there's a B2 or B4 area. I will then go and go find a route, create a route, I think is where I need to go. And it will take me to the map tools. And let's say I can then put in address to be able to start the process. So let's get rid of that here. All right, so let's put an address in here, and let's put in something like, I'll just put in Botany in Australia, see what comes up. And from there, it'll automatically bring in Botany. So I can zoom in here, and let's say, and I can actually tell you in here because I know Botany reasonably well. So if I take you through, and let's say I was going to put, and with the benefit of hindsight, I probably would have done this, put a new generation boarding house into an old property of ours, which was in a street down here. So I would start and I would then start my route, I'll click anywhere on the map, and let's just say that the house was here. I know that there is lots of shops up here, so I'd be within the 400 meters quite easily. Though what I need to do is you can click, let's say it's over here, and it will find the easiest route for you to find, and it will tell you that this is 0.38 kilometers. So if that was the case, that the zoning started here, I know that I'd be under 400 meters because I can do the 0.38. That would be the right distance. Now, it has to be right from the front door, and you have to be able to cross the road and go along and do all of that. So you have to prove to them that you are within the 400 meters, and you wouldn't be able to use Map My Run, but it'll give you an indication that you are within that region. So that is this is for all zones. If you can't meet this in an R2 zone, you can't build a new generation boarding house. You can apply for a boarding house through council, but it'll be under their sets of rules. If you're R2, so I just want to get this clear in your head. If it's R2 and you can't meet this criteria, you can't do a new generation boarding house. You can only do a normal boarding house if it's allowable in that zoning. So if it's not allowable in the zoning under the state government policy, it is allowable if you can meet this criteria. For all the other zones, it's fine. If you meet that criteria, it gives you some benefits. So what are the benefits? You have an increase to the floor space ratio, which means that you can build more on your block. You have to be relevant to the height of the zoning, and you have to also have landscape areas that will give you setbacks and stuff. So that means the first part of it is that you get an increased bonus. The solar access of the new generation boarding house, and just let me find for you the policy. This is a fact sheet. This is a 2011 fact sheet, and it hasn't been updated and doesn't need to be at this stage. There hasn't been any changes. They're actually going through some feedback at the moment. And when we're looking at this here, you have the ability to read through this document and find exactly what I'm saying here. So that it explains what a boarding house is, that you let out part of the lodgings or the whole of the lodgings. They may have shared facilities. They're the zonings that you're allowed to do it in. And again, where the R2 comes into it. So the assessment process goes through and looks at different things. So the accessibility regions that we just went through, you've got the floor space ratio, the height, the solar access. So you need one communal room that has 3 hours of sunlight on the 23rd of June. So that means that the shortest day of the year, you have to have 3 hours of sunlight between 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock entering that room via a window or something like that. The private open space, you need 20 square meters for the whole new generation boarding house. You also need 8 square meters adjacent to a manager's accommodation. Now, let me get you through the understanding of that. You only need a manager's unit in the property if you've got more than 20 people or 20 residents staying in the property. Now, when I say that, if you've got 10 double rooms and you've only got 10 people in there, you still will need a manager's unit because 20 people can be in that property. And that manager will need 8 square meters off their own manager's unit. If you can meet the accessibility areas, you only need 1 car spot per 5 rooms. That's what this says here. 1 car spot per 5 rooms is all that you need to allow, and you also need to allow 1 for the manager. If you can't be inside that accessibility region, then you need to provide 0.4 car spots. So for every 5 rooms, you will need 2.5 car spots, so 3 car spots. Now, that being said, that's only for those zonings except for R2. So if you're outside the zones, then you can't use the R2 zoning. You can't be in that space. That's only for the other zoning. When it comes to the room size, the room sizes are a single room is 12 to 16 square meters. And then you can add an ensuite and add a kitchenette to that. So ultimately, you would end up with a room that's self-contained 16 to 22 square meters once you add the ensuite and add the kitchenette. Once you have 5 rooms, you need to add a communal area. The maximum room size is 25 square meters. So your double rooms are 16 to 25 square meters, plus ensuite, plus kitchenette. That will mean that you'll end up with a room size of about 22 to 32 square meters. The maximum people you can put in a room is 2. The management, again, you need 20 people before a site manager kicks in. Commercial developments, if you've got a commercial zoning, your bottom floor fronting the street needs to be the commercial usage, and then you can put the residential purposes behind it or up above it. You'll need cycle parking in there as well. So there's lots of frequently asked questions here. What are the requirements for kitchens and bathrooms? They say adequate. I can't stand when they have policies that say things that aren't measurable. What does adequate actually mean? You know, adequate for one person is different to another. It drives me insane. I don't know who writes these policies. I wish I was there for them. All they had to do was a simple program through TAFE, and they would have realised that that's a bad word to use. You have the abilities to, you can do a class 3 boarding house. So that means that you need to self-contain the fire rating in each one of them. And so, the bigger you get, this is what happens. You've got other local, so there's lots of rules. Do Section 94 contributions apply? Absolutely. So if you are applying for a new generation boarding house, you will pay contributions depending on the size of the rooms or how big they are. Voluntary planning agreements, well, the developer can have consents, and I'll talk about the availability of funding that comes from putting these in. So we went through those areas in that fact sheet. You can look up the fact sheet and get it for yourself. And the commercial development there, we talked about the cycle parking. Again, if there is an inconsistency between the state government policy and the local council local environmental planning policy, then the state government overrules the local government. Now, with this, you are land tax exempt if you are in New South Wales if you create a new generation boarding house. As long as you don't rent the room, a single room for more than $332 and one for $550, a double for $552, which is a lot of money, that there's more than 3 rooms to let, and that 80% of the people are renting the rooms for 3 months or longer, you have zero land tax in New South Wales. That's an absolute bonus if you're buying in a trust structure, because in New South Wales, you pay land tax from $1 if you buy in a structure. There is a monetary assistance program that if you want to upgrade an existing boarding house, the fire safety in the existing boarding house, or if you want to create new rooms, you can make an application to the state government, and they will look at your plans, they'll look at the need in the area, and they'll say to you, we'll pay you $2,000 for those rooms that we approve. We'll give you $2,000 per room for the next 5 years, and you can do this before you get council approval, because you put this with your council approval, and it adds to the ability for your council to look at it and say, we agree that there's a need in this area. The state government obviously agrees on it, and it'll add weight to your application. So I'm just writing a note to myself here, because we do have approval on rooms in our development here, which is going through council, and I'm just going to remind them of that because it just twigged my mind to bring it to the table for them. Now, that's the assistance program you can go to. Just Google it. Now, this is the process. You have an application that goes to Housing New South Wales. You receive the expression of interest. They assess the preliminary application, and it goes back to you, and they say, yeah, okay. Now, that means that they'll say, yes, we will give you a certain amount. You then go off and design, or you might design and send them the design, which is what we did. You lodge the DA. The DA gets approved. You tell the state government that you have a development application. That triggers the amount of time of where the start of this funding arrangement can happen. You need to complete it within a year. The construction happens, and tenders for construction happen, and we go through this process. You sign a deed of agreement. The occupation certificate is put in there. A final inspection happens by the state government, and the grant gets approved for 5 years. As long as you have the ongoing people in there at 3 months or longer, then they're happy to give you the funding. The 4 self-contained rooms that I mentioned earlier is a really quite strong part of the regulations that you can use to your advantage. There's also no ruling that says that you can't make application for 2 boarding houses, new generation boarding houses, on the same block of land. So if you had a strata titled unit that was 4 bedrooms each side, then there's no reason you can't put in 2 applications to convert those if you owned the whole property and you were in control of the body corporate. Now, for me, just going out and building a 4-bedroom home like this with 4 bathrooms, this would nicely have a disabled bathroom in one area, and you would then have the ability to build this as a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom home with 1 kitchen. You'd ask a certifier to get this approved, but this would be constructed so each area has its electricity separated back to the switchboard, and each area could then be rented out. So this area here is about 32 square meters. Call it 35 just for today. So 35 square meters is this little square in the corner here, which means that the total building size is 140 square meters. That's about 100 square meters than a normal house, and less than a normal house, which means it's cheaper to build. You get this in, you put a HMO policy in there because you've got all your smoke detectors in there in the right place, and you've got all the fire safety that the insurance company requires. You rent out each one of these as a room, as a share house, and then you start getting cash flow. You'll probably get, a decent cash flow and an okay cash flow out of this by renting it in that way. Then you'll go back to council and you'll apply to council. So the first part of it was approved through a certifier. The second part of it is where you go back to council and you say to council, I want to put a new generation boarding house policy in. The set of plans that you put into council have 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 4 kitchens. The council looks at it, they go through the process of approval, and then they end up saying, yes, we agree, you can approve it. You can go through with it. You get your construction certificate after the development application, and then you put in a wall here, you put in a kitchen here, and a kitchen here, and then you end up with 4 separate self-contained rooms which do not require a communal area because it's under 4 rooms. So you've got 4 rooms or less, no communal area. If you put a 5th room on there, you would require a communal area. Now, if you took the same concept and you built a house and secondary dwelling on a block, you could end up with 2 leases to start with, where you would have a HMO on the front and a HMO on the back, and it would then you'd go back to council and change this HMO into the same thing again, 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom, 4 kitchen. And now, because you've got 6 self-contained rooms, you would put the disabled bathroom back here, and you would then call this the communal area in your plans. That means you would have 2 separate buildings, but this is a standard house and secondary dwelling application, and then you would be able to turn it into 6 lettable areas. I get really excited when I talk about this because this is using rules to your advantage, because you can fund this at 80 or 90% and then do the conversion afterwards, and you get really great cash flow from that. There is councils all over the place that are starting to realise that building smaller and being smarter is coming to the nest, and they're talking here, the Byron Shire Council, about tiny homes and approval for tiny homes, which is, if they can bring in a policy, and I'm working on them through the task force to make sure that happens. In Gosford, you may have seen this all over the media, they've created an application through Gosford Council for 4 tiny homes and a community centre in the middle of it. This is council land. It's a not-for-profit that's going through here. And all the tiny house movement's going, yay, finally a tiny house policy. But it's actually not a tiny house policy at all. This is a new generation boarding house application. If you go into the council documents, that's what it says. Now, there is a boarding house register that you can go to and find out if there is any boarding houses in the area. So let me just simply punch in here. So that's the website here. I can punch in Botany and do a search on that and see what comes up of how many registered boarding houses. Now, the state government were very tricky a few years ago, because what they did was they said, we will give you, for any boarding houses that are currently running, if you're not licensed, the Office of Fair Trading said you can register and license. So a lot of people went and registered their boarding houses that weren't legal and registered it with the Office of Fair Trading, thinking that's all they had to do because there was an amnesty in place. Well, what that triggered was the ability for the councils to go onto the register and check in the council documentation whether the boarding house that was registered was approved originally in that council. So they end up going and showing a lot of show cause notices about why are you operating a boarding house when it's not legal, and they close down a lot of them. So if you see a boarding house for sale in New South Wales, be very careful and check that it is registered and that it is approved with the council. So registered one way and approved the other way. So you can see in Botany, let me check a few other. Let's check Bankstown, because I think there is quite a few in Bankstown area. I'll do my search on that and find out. So you can see there's not that many. That's pretty good. That's not bad at all. And yeah, so notice they've got the addresses here. You could go and look for the council application and get some feedback on that and what that means, and have a look for the planners that have done all of this, the designers that have done all this, and work towards an outcome for yourself. And that's the end of New South Wales. So, think about the policies, think about what you can do from holiday rental to HMOs to starting a new generation boarding house as a starting point. So let me just show you, I just want to be, let's 1 second. Just let me get this up for you. And so I suppose a good thing to do just before I leave is go through and show you a standard application for one of the larger new generation boarding houses that we're doing. And, for me, when I say larger, it's not huge. It's 21 rooms, I think it is. 1 second. Yes, 21 rooms. So it has the ability of 20 rooms, so 40 people plus the manager's unit as well. Now, the manager's unit could be as big as you want. So if you were looking for possibly doing something on your own home, then you could create a 2-3 bedroom manager's unit and have a new generation boarding house underneath you or beside you or above you or wherever, So there is possibilities to do this in your own home where you've got your own property, your own area within the boundaries with your own backyard and yard, and 8 square metres is the minimum you can have, but there's nothing stopping you from having 30 or 40 square metres of outdoor space for yourself, and then a new generation boarding house. So you might do 4 rooms, 5 rooms, 6 rooms, 10 rooms, whatever you like. So when it comes to the PPR status, well, yeah, you can have a component of it as PPR, but it would be a smaller component than normal. The advantage of what you're getting is getting cash flow. So trying to get tax capital gains exemption is going to be another thing. So let's quickly just look at what would be required under normal circumstances. So let me take you to the checklist that this particular council is doing it. Now, don't go and do something in Botany simply because Ian and Christine are doing one. This is actually not the correct checklist, but it's very similar to the commercial checklist because it's a commercial property that we're looking at. So you'll have to go through, you have to, have consent from the owner, and as a corporate trustee and trust, you have to do it care of, because you're not the owner. You're simply saying that the trust is the owner and you sign on behalf of the owner as the directors of the corporate trustee. You got to tell them where you got political donations, the format requirement of what they want. They want a detailed cost report if it's more than $500,000. So you'll need to get a quantity surveyor to come in and price it. A survey plan with everything on it, so it tells you what they want. Existing developments, the plan of the existing property, a demolition plan, site analysis plan, which is, what's on there, what's going on, what's happening. The site plan has to have all of these things: site dimensions, the north, the boundary setback, the locations, the levels of trees. The floor plans will have to have 1 in 100 at A3, and they have to show the dimensions. They have to show internal walls, nuclear calculations of the proposed floor area. So that's important because they need to know whether the floor space ratio is correct. You need to have elevations at 1 in 100 showing all other buildings around it and heights, the external finishes and the makeup of that, the sections of the building, so that you want to cut through the middle of the building so that they can see what it looks like and see the room names and understand what that is. The trees and the landscape plan. So we have done a landscape plan that meets the criteria for all of these and shows the RLs, a few other things. Now, shadow diagrams. So you need shadow diagrams at 9, 12 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 21st of June, which is the equinox. And equinox is the shortest day of the year. And so 21st of March, 21st of September as well. So it's a fair amount of drawing that needs to be done. It'll show overshadowing onto neighbours and making sure that the solar access is correct for different components of the dwelling or the development that you're doing. A stormwater plan showing everything that needs to go on there. A soil, water and management plan. So that means that on the block when you're doing the development, how are you going to stop runoff water from polluting the stormwater drains and making sure that it's contained on site. You want to show a driveway profile. You have to show gross floor area and work out what that is. And services plan, so where is the electricity, water, drainage, all of that sort of stuff. A statement of environmental effects. This is done by your town planner if it's a bigger development, and you can go through and do your own. I suggest that you don't do it with a new generation boarding house. I think you get a planner involved. If it's SEP 65, what you're doing with it, heritage impact, and if it's not applicable, then it's not a problem. The schedule of colours and materials that are going on there, a basic certificate. You'll also need contamination reports, acid sulfate soil report, acoustic report, traffic report, notification plans, construction waste access report, a flood report, geotechnical wind model, all these other things that need to be done, and then you sign it at the back end. Now, the end result of all of this is that this is for a larger development, so don't get too freaked out about that. Let me take you through the documentation that we've got in file. So notice that we've got a file with a number of different parts and folders that are in this file. This is a folder that Christine will straight away go into the finance applications to be able to feed information to the mortgage broker or the bank to give them information. On the boarding house component, we've got all these folders. I've got a similar approval in an area, so I wanted to look at their plans and have a look at all their plans and make sure that I've ticked off the box in there. We've got our final application, which goes in up the top. We've got a brief that I created for the designer. So I went through everything that I thought was needed to be in there. I went through the council strategic plan, exactly what they wanted to put in there, the turning circles to make sure that they complied, the boarding house themselves, making sure that commutes. I go, this is out of the Botany Council plan of what they wanted to see on this particular zone, and they've actually drawn and shown us exactly what they want to see. So that means I can go back and then, and I know that I've got a complete understanding from the designer that he understands what I understand. The final application here, we go into that box here, and just 1 second. So let me close this up a little bit. So we got the final plans is those ones there. We got the I've blanked this one out, and I'll show you this because I want to remove contacts from it. And the reason I've removed contacts is the guys that have designed this for us only do large-scale hotels and motels, and I don't want you calling them talking about a 3-room or 4-room boarding house. We've got people around. Once you've got a block of land that you're seriously considering and you've shown that you've got a feasibility on it, then we'll start talking about being able to open up to the teams that we've got in New South Wales. Because in New South Wales, you'll have to use multiple teams. We do have one that will take you from design through to occupation, and we will make them available to you as we go, and you can then start using them. So if you do in anywhere here find or see something that you might go and ring them up and not let me know about it, please understand that I won't be happy about that because it's taken me a long time to build up those relationships, and I don't want their time wasted because I've been working on them for 5-10 years now to get to the point that we're at today, and you could break that down in one conversation, and I would hate for that to happen because that not only hurts me, it hurts everyone else as well. So you'll need a set of notification plans. You've got the colour, this is the finishes and the colours that are going on there. We've got an acoustic report. Now, the acoustic report is twofold. Firstly, it is what's the noise coming out of the building, what's the noise going between rooms, and what's the noise going to be, is there going to be a problem because this is in the aircraft noise path. And so the ANF reading here says that I need an acoustic report to make sure that the planes don't affect the residents as well. We've got what they call a Section J report, a building code report, which checks the compliance for the building, for the fire rating, for the universal access, and a number of other things in there too. So that's what they call a Section J, which you will require for a New South Wales New Generation boarding house. You've got a council review panel document. This one here was we put in the set of plans originally to a review panel, which is an independent panel that we paid, that comes and sits on behalf of council and gives us feedback. They were all three of them were retired architects and gave us some feedback around possibly change that, move that there. We don't like that part of the design. And when after going to them, we essentially had to really redesign the whole thing because they didn't like the aspect of the light, and we were concerned about the neighbours overshadowing, and they weren't really concerned about that. They were concerned about the amenity of the people living in the property. So we redid it. A customer payment form because we had someone lodge on behalf of us, so we had how that can be paid. The DA checklist that we went through, the development application itself, because there's actually an application form that you fill out as well. The landscape plan, the statement of environmental effects, which is prepared by the planner, the costings on those, and the Section J, which goes in with the BCA report. So let's have a look at the documentation in the plans alone. When we look at the documentation, and so I've purposely got rid of these so that you can't see who it is that we've used. Again, because I don't want you to waste their time. I want you to make sure that if you're going to go to them, that you go to them with a full understanding of what you're needing to do. So you can see here, part of the review panel feedback was that they wanted us to fit in with the existing building. So we've got an Art Deco design on the front facade, which matches the existing facade, except that we're knocking down the existing facade and we're going to match in with the next door building, which we're attaching to. You've got a site survey, which has all the indications, a north point, measurements, the existing building, the concrete that's in there, the rear garage, a few things like that. A demolition plan, which shows what we're demolishing. So we're keeping that rear garage and turning that into a manager's unit, and then all the rest of it's being demolished, including the awning, and then we're rebuilding. We then have a plan that says, where's the site, what is it, what's the directions to the CBD and the airport, a few understandings around the wind probability to make sure that it's not going to be too much of a damage from, wind direction. We then have a plan, which is the site plan, and this is what are the surrounding buildings, and, so my expectation is that there's not going to be too many problems. We got shops over here. That's a property owned by, that's a shop, and the property up from that is also a state government owned building. The block of units next door, residential. So they're, the neighbours are residential. We'll see what they say about that. This here is the soil waste and erosion management plan, which goes with a set of documentation as well. It shows, that there's fencing going up, that there's an area where the trucks need to clean off, some storage facilities for waste and for materials. This one here is a stormwater plan, and that's a simple stormwater plan, which is also backed up with a little bit of a detailed one, plus we've got an engineering detailed plan as well, and a key with the movement of water from floor to floor and how that works. This one here is a proposed ground floor. So you can see the streets up here. We've got a unit in here. We've put in a universal toilet, so that's part of the building, and it wasn't required, I don't believe, but we put it in anyway. We've got an entrance. We got two different entrances to the building on this side, and we've got a third entrance as well to get into here. So the disability access people will go in through here, around and into the communal area. They have a chair lift, so the two disabled bathrooms and bedrooms are down here. They've got a chair lift that will take them up to the first floor where the communal area is. Out the back here, we've got the manager's unit. So the manager, we had to create another fire stair here to get up and out through into the street, and that would be a fire-rated fire stair. This here is a manager's unit with their own yard, and this is the outside yard for the accessible rooms. and that will hardly ever get used. That'll probably be used by the manager more than anything else. If we go further down, we then have the further down on the paperwork, but one floor up. We come up the stairs, so there's two entering points here. There's the set of stairs 2, which takes you into this area, or set of stairs 3, which takes you into this area. That's the fire escape from downstairs. You'd come up, go along the fire passage, and back down out into the street. So we're now on the first floor. We've got another set of stairs that come up here and there. So this is where the fire stairs get you up, and it takes you up again, and you come up these stairs for the wheelchair access. They come up the wheelchair and into here. You've got a communal space with a outdoor kitchen and barbecue here, and you've got these rooms plus a communal area in here. There's a bathroom in there as well, toilet in there, a powder room. So notice that every room has their own bed, their own bathroom, and their own kitchen as well. Up here, you've got the site statistics and the amount of space that it's taking up. So we've got a floor space ratio. This is actually not the final set of plans. The floor space ratio was a lot less than that. And you've got all the room sizes through here, and you have details about windows and locks and a legend so people can follow what it is. So notice this dotted line through here, that is what they call a section cut. So when you go to the sections, they will cut that building in half so that you can see it as a vertical through that way, and there's another cut going through this way, which when they'll cut the building and you'll look into it. So the arrow's pointing that way, so you'll be looking from this direction into these rooms when the cut happens. Again, going through into the next floor up. So this is the top floor. So you'll come up the set of stairs here. You'll end up on this walkway that looks down into the courtyard. We've got a green wall that happens along here. We've got another set of stairs that comes up here. So you need 2 sets of fire stairs, and I think the measurement is 40 metres from each door to the fire stairs is what you need to do. So if there was a fire in here, this room can get out and into here. If there was a fire, and this room could get out in here. If there was a fire over here, then this doorway could be this doorway here can be no more than 40 metres. So let's say that this one caught on fire and you couldn't get access to this fire stair, or there was a fire in the communal area, then this person would need to travel no more than 40 metres to get to the fire escape door and then get out. You got all these rooms again that have, there's bigger rooms and smaller rooms. So our biggest room is in total 21. There's a room 15. So room 15 and 16 are 24.7 and 24.5, plus the kitchen, plus the bathroom. So they're probably 32 to 35 square metres this room. Quite decent sized rooms. They've got their own little outdoor vision through there, through a screen, so it's actually protecting the neighbours for privacy. The shadow diagrams at different times of the morning on the 21st of June and what it looks like and how it's overshadowing. So you can see here that the overshadow is going on to the block of units next door. And, so it's okay at some parts of the day where you'll get filtering of light through the green wall, but otherwise, you've got shadow diagrams showing exactly what's going on at different times of the day and different times of the year as well. And, these requirements. So these are quite a detailed set of plans. This is the front view showing the block of units next door, the proposed development, and that's the rear manager unit. So around the back of our block, what you can see. You've got the rear of the building. So you've got this screen platform going on where people can't look into the neighbours. You've got the manager's unit, the building next door, and the block of units next door. You've got a side elevation so this is the chicken shop next door. So if the chicken shop wasn't there, that's what you would be looking at. You would have, this is the view from the block of units. So you'll have a view of the wall and you'll have a view of the greenery. Now remember, you'll be saying, geez, I'd hate to have to live next to a wall like that. That block of units there, they could knock down the block of units and put up a wall on my boundary as well. So you just got to remember that it all has its its own merits, and the council has to look at that. So yes, it's going to create a shadow, but at the same token, it's also got the ability. I could build 12 metres high, and I've only built 11, 9, 7, 8.5, 9 metres high. So, you know, I could put another story on top of that if I wanted to, but the council probably wouldn't want that, wouldn't like it. It's not that they could knock it back, but I'd have to fight probably to get it through. This is the section cut I was talking about. So this is looking through the building cut in half, looking at from the chicken shop towards a block of flats. You've got a green wall here, plus all the rooms that are going through. This is a section cut the other way, looking from the front of the building towards the back. And you've got the car park here. That's the door to get into the disabled rooms. This is the rooms upstairs. You then have the front elevation, some isometric drawings you can see there. So you can see that we've got an outdoor space. The council wants to see livable areas out on balconies to protect the street from crime. You've got also this area up here which will allow you to look over the top and create a visual security for people on the street. So just a few drawings, what it looks like in the backyard. The hallways, this is the communal area with the green wall down here. This is looking down, and these are the rooms as you go through. So they'll have all of this shading going through. This is one of the walkways to get to a bedroom, to one of the room micro apartments upstairs, and the walkway along here. So you can see that they all can look down into this space that's fairly open and quite decent and well protected. So again, looking the other way, this is the area with the barbecue and kitchen in it. These doors have access to a balcony out here. This is ventilation from downstairs in the car park to allow the car park to be able to ventilate. Again, looking from the top floor down into that space, into where down here is where the barbecue area is. You can see it fairly open. My suggestion is that the final set of plans will have a roof over the top of that to allow people to be able to walk through and not get too wet. So again, this is the top views so that you can see it, and then we have detail about the internal rooms and the elevations of the internal rooms, the window schedule, and then it gets to eventually the disabled bathrooms and making sure that they comply with the turning of the wheelchair and all that sort of stuff. So that's the sort of stuff that you're going to need to put towards council when you get bigger. When they're smaller, obviously there's a lot less work in that. There's a lot less work in the plans, and we've got the people for you to help you out on that. Till the next time, you've got lots of modules there, and you've got the other states to go through. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.